Now we are going to have Alexandra Walling.
Thank you, Miriam and Gertrude, for asking me to speak here today. I want to talk a little bit about a double stigma of mental illness and racism in our country, and the way the two of them combined produce some of the worst instances of police brutality and of police killings both nationally and in our community. And I want to talk to you about 3 examples of police brutality toward people with mental illness in Monterey County. Forgive me if you are already aware of these stories. In the fall of 2014, the father of a black student at CSUMB called for emergency help for his son, who he feared was in the middle of a mental health crisis. The campus police officer, Tom Nguyen, responded and used his crisis intervention training to de-escalate the situation. He also called for backup, and 3 Marina police officers responded. When Officer Nguyen left the room to fetch the student a glass of water, the student became agitated, and the 3 Marina police officers chose each to deploy their tasers on this 150-pound, distraught, ill student and pin him to his bed. Officer Nguyen was fired by CSUMB for choosing not to deploy a 4th taser on this already restrained young man. The 3 Marina police officers were not punished for their excessive force, and the Marina police chief urged CSUMB to fire Officer Nguyen, calling him a coward who froze for choosing to use crisis intervention training rather than force. It was only after a lengthy lawsuit that Officer Nguyen won his job back, and as far as I know, no punishment was ever meted out to the Marina officers for their use of force. In 2015, the Salinas police were caught on video beating Jose Velasco in the streets because a citizen had the foresight to pull out his camera and begin filming when he saw this altercation. Jose Velasco was a man living with schizophrenia. His mother called 911 asking for help because she could not bring her son to safety while he was in the middle of a mental health crisis in the streets. When the police arrived, they immediately began an altercation with Jose Velasco and beat him. They beat him while he was standing, and when he fell to the ground, they continued to beat him while he writhed in pain on his arms, on his legs, on his back, and on his head. The police who beat Jose Velasco, and there were many of them who beat him with their batons, were cleared of all excessive force charges. Jose Velasco was charged with 2 felonies and held a $100,000 bail in the Monterey jail, which meant that he could not get treatment for his schizophrenia, as his mother had wished. In December of 2015, I was in the Monterey courthouse where I had just been sentenced for my role in a previous protest, and immediately after I went upstairs to watch the testimony of one of the police officers who had beaten Jose Velasco. I watched him testify to the tactical necessity of every single baton strike to Mr. Velasco's body. I challenge you to watch the video of this beating and find a tactical necessity for the 5 strikes to Mr. Velasco after he was restrained on the ground by 4 other police officers. Finally, the final instance I want to speak about, and these are not the only ones. In 2014, many of the killings of Hispanic, Latino men in Salinas were of people with mental illness. But the last instance I want to speak about in the fall of 2015 happened to a man named Donald Miller, who was white and mentally ill and homeless in Monterey. And he was killed by the Monterey police in the Custom House Plaza while he was in the grips of a mental health crisis. Mr. Miller had been arrested earlier that day at a McDonald's for trespassing. And when he was arrested, police noted his erratic behavior. In fact, he had been in contact with the police throughout the entire previous year as a homeless transient with mental illness. At no time subsequent to his arrest for trespassing Was he offered mental health services or put in contact with any services? Instead, he was quickly released from jail. After he was released, he went into an antique store where he stole a non-functioning antique pistol, which was not loaded, which he then proceeded to wave in the air. Citizens who were concerned that he might be violent called the police, and when the police responded, Officer Zach Reed shot him within seconds of making contact. I believe this was an avoidable tragedy, that the police could have done more to keep Donald Miller safe when they made contact with him earlier in the day. I urge all of you who have friends, loved ones, family with mental illness to pause the calls to police when your loved ones are in crisis. Many of us believe that the police can help us, but too often they violently escalate already volatile situations. For people who are living under the twin oppressions of racism and the stigma against mental illness, interactions with the police, not altercations, interactions with the police, too often end in brutality and violence. Please work to hold your police and the district attorneys accountable for excusing these instances of brutality in our community and nationally. Thank you.